All right, well, I know there is another video of me tying the 2-bit hooker. I've had a few requests lately for a video of tying the jigged version of the 2-bit hooker. And it is a little bit different in the tying process. So I'm gonna accommodate that today by showing you how I go about it. And what I've got here in the vise is a Tiemco 403 BLJ. It's a 60-degree jig hook, and the first bead I've got on there is a 3.3 millimeter. That's a brown bead. You can, obviously use whatever bead colors you like. This is a size 14, so I've got a 3.3 slotted tungsten bead. That's this front bead here. And I've set that on the hook so that it lines up with the slot to line up here on the upright. And then I've got a 7/64 conventional bead, and this one I've used in red just to sort of delineate, but it does make kind of a cool thorax that I'm going to just push right up behind it. So we're sticking with our 2-bead story and staying with that. I'll tie you a red one, just because I really like the red ones. I fish a lot of the red. So I'm going to take some Veevus 14-aught thread, and I'll start it here behind that red bead. Get that tag end trimmed out, and I'm going to come just to the bend of the hook there, and that's where I'll tie my tail in. And for the tail, this is just India henback. This feather particularly is a whiting CDL hen saddle feather, but regular India henback works just fine. These CDL fibers are just longer and easier to work with, and I'm going to take a clump of these fibers like so, and pull them out at a right angle so that their tips become as even as I can get them, like so. And I'll grab that clump and peel it off the feather. So I've got just a little tail clump. And I'm going to measure this it's about a half shank, maybe just slightly longer than a half shank long. And I'll tie this in back here at the bend. Get just a couple turns on them. There we go. And then, before I move my thread forward, I'm going to take another bobbin loaded with black 14-aught. And I'm going to catch the end of this thread here in that same spot and wrap forward over both the butt ends of the tail and that tag end of the thread up to that bead. And then I'll take my bobbin and just drape it over the back of my vise. You can see that thread's just hanging there out of the way. And I'll trim the butt ends of the tail out. So now I'm going to use my red thread to build my abdomen, and we're on a size 14 here, so it's going to take a little bit of thread work. We just want to build a nice even thread abdomen with a bit of a taper to it, nice and smooth. And what I don't want to do is jam these beads together. You can see how that bead will still slide back a bit. We want to leave ourselves a little bit of working room there. And you may need to manage your thread a bit just to keep the twist out. But I want fairly skinny little body there. And then I can whip finish that red thread behind the bead and trim it out of there. So we're done with the red. Obviously, whatever color fly you were going to tie, your first color would be your primary color. And then typically black for the rib, although, on a black one I use copper wire for the rib. So I'm going to take now, and I'm going to turn my vise a bit. You can see my thread hanging there, and I'll spin this black thread up just a bit. I'm not cording it like crazy, but I do want to cord it up a bit. And what that'll do is make for a smaller profile rib as I wrap up. The reason I turned my hook there is so that my thread doesn't run into the hook point. I don't want to take the chance of fraying it there. So now I'm going to spiral wrap this black thread 3 or 4 turns through the abdomen to create the rib on the fly. You can see that makes a nice, very quill-esque style rib. Pretty slick little way of doing that. And then I'm going to take just a tiny bit of dubbing here to start to build our thorax. Now, this fly doesn't have a wing case that's tied in. I've come up with a way to sort of build the wing case on what I believe is the correct side of the hook, which would be the inside of the bend, as this fly will ride upside down. And I'll show you how we go about that. So I'm going to take a little bit of mahogany colored superfine dubbing, and I'm going to put this on as tightly as I can get it on my thread here. I want a very thin, very tight strand. And I'm going to build up behind our red bead a ball of dubbing that's about as big as the bead, kind of tapering up to the size of the bead, about like so. Now, because this fly is going to ride with the hook point up, I want to cross this thread across the bottom and bring that dubbing in between the two beads and build up a bit of a neck there. Like so. You can see the cross there across the bottom. So now I'm going to come in and with that same hen feather, like so, I'm going to take a little clump of fibers and square their tips. And I'll pull this clump off. I'm going to tie this in along the far side over that neck of dubbing, just a couple turns. And I want those tips to extend back just about to where the barb would be if this hook had a barb. You can see I can kind of tweak those down to length if need be. Then I'll take a like-sized clump from the other side of the feather and tie these in along my near side. And what I'm doing here, people seem to have a lot of trouble with these legs. What I'm doing with these legs, I've just got them clumped up like we did the tail, and I'll just hold them up next to the hook and just press them in place with my thumb and get a turn or two around them. Once I've got that on there, if I need to adjust for length, these butt ends are very long, so they're much easier to adjust, and I want them kind of down along the sides. And I can sort of tweak them to length. This near side's still a little long. And ultimately I want those legs facing just slightly up. That's a pretty good angle there. So just slightly up. Again, keep in mind this fly is going to drift upside down with the hook point up. So I want those legs to face just slightly up. And then I'll come in and roll these butt ends and cut with just the tips of my scissors to trim those off as close as I can get them. Like so. See the little stub that we've got left here? I'll show you a good way to catch that. See how I could bring the thread around in front of it and sort of push those fibers back and clean those up with a few turns of thread so they're not sticking out quite so much. So that concludes the tying process. So I'll come in and whip finish now. Up behind that first bead. And I'll trim that thread out. Now, just to make this easier to see, I'm going to turn this hook upside down in the vise. I'll bring it up just a bit here. And at this point, I'm going to add some resin. And the best way I found to do this, we're going to build a wing case out of resin. And the best way I found to do this is to do it in two coats. So what I want to do, first of all, is pick up, I've got some medium viscosity Solarez, and I'm going to take this drop and I'm going to put it right on top of that bead and work back over the top edge of the body to the base of the tail and then sweep forward. And I want to kind of keep it a little thin over that bead for right now. Wipe off my extra. I want to make sure I got the entire top surface there coated nicely, like so. And then I'll cook that with my lamp. And on and off with the lamp, and you want to hold your lamp fairly far away again just to make sure everything cures slowly and all the way through. And that's what we've got. Get you a little better focus there. That's what we've got across the top. Now you can see that strand of dubbing through the resin from underneath. But what we're going to do now to color in that wing case is I'm just going to take a Copic marker and I'm just going to color, literally just draw in that sort of oval shaped wing case over that bead. And I like these Copic. Sharpies will work also. I like these Copics. They have a very fine tip. So I'll color in that wing case. So we've got that black segment. And then I'll pick up, usually, there's just enough resin left on my needle. And I'm going to go over the top of that one more time and smooth that out. And you can see a lot of times you'll have a little lump or bump or point from where you put the resin over the dubbing, especially if it's not super tight. You can sort of smooth that off with this second coat to build a bit more prominent wing case here on this fly. To smooth it out like so. Once I've got that where I want it, I'll cook that layer. And again, on and off, like so. And then we've got, get us focused up again, we've got our jigged 2-bit hooker. You know, honestly, it's a little easier to tie than the conventional 2-bit hooker. And while this fly was around a lot longer than Perdigons, you can see the I'll say influence. Even though this was long before I'd ever even heard of a Perdigon, but a skinny-bodied fly with a lot of weight on it. You can see that nice red bead on the bottom. I've mushed up some of my legs there. I'll smooth those out. Like so. Bring us back down into focus so you can get a nice even view. You haven't been drinking too much. You just go on, keep drinking. You're fine. So you can see the bottom. We've got that red bead showing. And then from the top, we've got our resin wing case with that shiny coat. Cool fly. You know, I was never a big fan of jigs. They, you know, we just did the Legacy series of flies with Umpqua, and we were talking about new things that have come out over the years, including bead heads and flies like the Clouser minnow. And I was a young man when bead heads first came out, and you know, everybody, you know, me included, were sort of a hard sell on those things. We didn't understand how they would work and so forth. And since then, I've learned that if it's, you know, if I look at something and think it's weird or dumb and that it'll never work, it usually turns into a pretty big thing. And that has absolutely been the case with these jig flies. They do ride hook point up so they don't snag up as easily as conventional patterns. They do sink like a rock, and man, they do catch fish. So here I am on the bandwagon, and this is my version of the 2-bit hooker on a jig hook. I hope you like that. I hope that answered the questions of how to go about that. You know, keep in mind you can build a wing case like that on any variety of flies. It doesn't have to be a jig hook, but pretty slick way of doing it, and really pretty easy. But there he is. Thanks for watching. I'm Charlie Craven. That was the 2-bit jig.